Welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be sowing some Trachycarpus Fortunei seeds. Trachycarpus Fortunei is also known as a windmill palm. It's one of the hardiest palms that there is, and so if you're wanting to grow a palm in a location that gets quite cold, or even a location that gets quite cool summers, Trachycarpus Fortunei is probably one of the best ones to grow. There might be a few other palms which can take slightly colder temperatures, so Trachycarpus should be fine down to -15 or so. There's a few that can take slightly colder temperatures, but then they need slightly warmer summers. Whereas Trachycarpus Fortunei, it comes from the foothills of the Himalayas, so it's not particularly hot during the summer because it's high altitude, and then it's used to a bit of snow and a bit of frost over winter. So as long as it's not below -15, it should be fine. And nearly everywhere in the UK, apart from a long way from the coast, is absolutely fine. -15 doesn't normally get down to that very often. The only place you wouldn't be able to go in the UK is probably the Scottish Highlands or somewhere well inland where you can get -20 sometimes. So I'm going to be growing this from seed. It's going to be a very slow process. I could have bought a small young plant, but I'm trying to save money, and also I like the bit of a challenge of trying to grow stuff from seed. So I'm growing these Trachycarpus from seed. This is actually a particular variety of Trachycarpus called Naini Tal. So here's the name here. This variety, it comes from a town in the Himalayas, or in India, in the foothills of the Himalayas, called Naini Tal. It's right up and high in the mountains. So this variety is about as hardy as a normal variety, maybe slightly hardier, but it's supposed to be a bit more robust, supposed to grow a little bit faster and do a bit better in cooler climates than the average Trachycarpus Fortunei. But it's pretty much the same plant, just a little bit faster growing, but a little bit hardier. So I should have slightly better results with this than getting a normal Trachycarpus. So the seeds from it, what I've been doing is I've been soaking them in a mug for a few days, just to make sure they're well hydrated. I've kept this at a cold temperature, around 8 or 10 degrees. I've got a cold spot in my conservatory where the cold air comes in from outside, and it's usually about 8 or 10 degrees. Because this is a temperate palm, it doesn't come from a tropical climate, it needs to have a cold period to break the dormancy. So I'm actually going to be potting these up in compost and then leaving them outside, and come spring I'll put them in a warmer location. Basically what they need is a month or two of cold temperatures, around 5 degrees Celsius, or just above freezing. That will let the seed know its winter's past, and then when the temperatures start warming up again in spring, it should grow quite rapidly. The problem is if you just put them in warm temperatures straight away, the seed has natural dormancy, because in the wild it would probably fall off the tree in autumn, and if it's still warm in autumn and it starts to grow, then the frost of winter could kill the seedling off. So it waits until it knows it's had a winter, and then it will germinate in spring when the temperature warms up again. And these seedlings are quite delicate when it comes to frost, so these aren't supposed to be as hardy as the adults. As I say, the adults can take about -15. The seedlings, it's more like -5 or something, or maybe even less, that they can take. So I'll be growing these inside my conservatory over spring. Come summertime, I might have them outside, I'm not sure yet, depends how much space there is in the conservatory. They should grow a little bit faster in the conservatory because of the extra warmth, and then I'll be leaving them probably in a greenhouse or a conservatory for the next year or two, just to get them a decent size, and then once it's large enough and hardy enough, then they can go in the garden and they should be able to survive our weather no problem. So I'm just going to be potting them up in multi-purpose compost. This compost is quite low in nutrients, so it's good for seeds. You can also use seed and cutting compost. Now this container doesn't have any holes in the bottom. Ideally you would have holes in the bottom. I'm going to be putting this in my greenhouse, which is unheated, but it means the rain won't get in here and get it too wet. So it'll get nice and cold, but it won't get too soggy. And I just need to keep these evenly damp for a month or two. It's now the middle of January, so I should have at least 2 months of cold weather. Come March, I'll take this into the conservatory. I might put it under a heated mat. I want it around 20-25 degrees, and that should encourage germination. So the seeds of Trachycarpus are actually a decent size. So these are the seeds. They do have a slight kind of papery covering on them, which you can leave or take off. You can see if I scrape it off there, it comes off very easily. And it just looks a bit like a bean, really, like a large bean. These have swelled up slightly because I have been soaking them for a few days, but they pretty much look like that when they came in the packet anyway. And they're quite large seeds, so they're easy to handle, easy to plant. The only downside with growing Trachycarpus from seed is it is very slow growing, and it's even slower growing when it's young. So the first few years it will probably take about 2 or 3 years even to get 1 foot tall, and to start growing a trunk I won't get a decent trunk until about 5 years probably, but I'll see if I can speed it up a little bit. But it is a slow process growing from seed. So I'm just going to plant these probably about 3 or 4 centimeters under the soil. So I'll just make a little hole like that, pop them in, make sure they're 2 or 3 centimeters underground, and then cover them up again. So that's the seeds now planted. What I will do though is I'll make sure if there's any hard frosts, I'll take this inside. I don't want it to get too cold. Whilst they're at the seedling stage, they can't really take a hard freeze, so I want it close to freezing, but just not a hard frost. So if it's anything like -1 or lower, I'll probably take it inside for the night. But anything -1 and above is no problem. A slight frost or a slight freeze shouldn't be an issue. The top layer of the compost will freeze, but it won't go too deep into the compost and damage the seeds. So that's about it for this part of the video. I'll hopefully see you in a few months' time with some germination. I don't know how well these are going to germinate, but the seeds do look quite good. None of them are shriveled up. They all look quite plump, so I'm hoping for decent germination. Trachycarpus, it will be a bit of a slow process because they need the cold dormancy, and then even in spring they can take a little while to get going. So I've got about 10 seeds here. I'm hoping for at least 1 or 2 plants, but we'll see how it goes. So it's now several months later. That first part of the video was actually filmed at the end of January. It's now the beginning of July, and to be honest, until about 2 or 3 weeks ago there was absolutely no sign of growth at all. So it's definitely been quite a long, slow process. These have actually been outside in my greenhouse most of the winter. I say it's a greenhouse, but it's got about 1/3 of its glass missing, so to be honest it doesn't give it much shelter from the temperature. It's just a little bit of shelter from the wind and keep some of the animals out. So this was allowed to be cold all winter. We actually had a particularly cold winter this year, went down to -15. I can't remember if I brought these inside. I probably did in that very coldest spell, or maybe covered them in snow just to insulate them from the coldest of frosts. But whenever it was -2, -3, even down to -5, I just left them outside. I didn't give them any protection, and I just really needed them to get that nice cold treatment, several hours at or below freezing. Ideally the temperature between 0 and 5 is the most ideal temperature. If you have it below freezing, it's actually not as beneficial. You want it around 0 to 5 degrees for cold treatment. So they had the whole winter with that. It then went through spring. I actually brought these inside, put them in a propagator, had them heated for about 25-30 degrees for about a month. Nothing seemed to happen, so then I just put them in my conservatory, which has fluctuating temperatures between about 20 and 35-40 degrees Celsius, and that's what seemed to get them going. Once they did shoot up, they have been incredibly slow at growing, so they're not fast growing plants. Don't plant these and expecting them to get a large palm tree in your lifetime unless you're probably quite young. These are very slow growing plants. It'll be interesting to see how big these get. I should hope maybe in 10 years time I might get a 6 foot 2 meter tall palm tree from these. We'll just have to wait and see. And to be honest, because these were taking such a long time, I went out and bought a young Trachycarpus palm that's probably about 3 or 4 years old, just to give me a head start in my garden. It's only about a foot in height, but just because I know these were going to take several years to get to a good size. But with this variety being supposed to be slightly faster growing cooler climates than the standard Trachycarpus Fortunei, I'm hoping that I might be able to catch up with the other one and actually overtake it. So although I was only wanting 1 or 2 Trachycarpus palms, I planted 10 seeds, and so far I think there's 7 that have come up. So that's pretty good germination rate. These are probably quite fresh seeds from the seed supplier, and although I had to wait a long time, the germination has been quite high, and I might even get 100% germination. I don't know yet. 1 or 2 of these little shoots only appeared in the last couple of days, so things are still happening, things are still germinating. I could even get 10 palms out of this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to separate these, put them into individual pots. The problem is if I leave them in this tray for too long, the roots are going to get really tangled, and then when I try to untangle them, they're going to get stressed out and I'll probably break off some of the roots. So before the roots get too big and tangled together, I want to separate them from this tray into individual pots so they got the space to grow without being congested with the roots from the other plants. So I'm just going to be very careful when trying to tease these out without damaging the roots or the new leaves. I'm going to individually pot them up into a 9 centimeter pot, which I think should be a good size probably for this summer. And then later on I'll put them into a larger pot. 9 centimeter is particularly small. It just saves on space, and it means that they're not overly potted. If you put them in an extra large pot, you could get waterlogging issues with some plants. So I'm going to have to be careful with these. I'm just going to try and kind of tease them out. So I'll probably just kind of flip it over into my hand and remove the whole thing from the plastic container. I'll just have to be careful where I position my fingers that I don't cross any of the stems. So I'm just going to take it slow, make sure these don't get injured, make sure I don't cross any of these new shoots. So you can see there several new roots starting to grow. So that's already breaking apart quite nicely, which I was hoping for. So I just want to be really careful, as I say, and the roots can be quite fragile at this stage, and you can see there's actually some here which are starting to germinate and they're not actually put on their the top half yet, so it does look like I've probably got more than 7, and I'll probably get close to 10. So I just want to carefully break this compost apart, don't want to damage any of the plants. You can see there we've got a nice young shoot, we've got a couple of roots coming down. I'll have a look at some of the more mature ones, they should have a bit better root system. You can see there you've got the leaf and a couple of roots coming out. Same with that one there, slightly better root system. That's the first seed leaf that comes up, and then I'll just slowly produce more leaves and produce more roots as well. So I'll just very carefully separate all of these, get them ready for planting. So that's actually pretty great news. I think I put 10 in and I've seemed to have 10 that have germinated. Then I don't think there's any existing seeds in here. As I say, I think it was only 10 that I planted, and I've got 10 that have shot up with new roots, so that's really good. So I'm just going to get a little 9cm pot, plant these roughly as deep as they were originally. I'm just going to very carefully fill it up. I'm just using multi-purpose compost. They're not too fussy when it comes to what kind of soil they like, but they do need to have well-drained soil, so make sure it's well drained. These are quite small pots, so I'm not too worried about using a rich multi-purpose compost at the moment. This isn't too rich though, I haven't gone for the very high feed level multi-purpose compost because these are seedlings, I don't want them to burn their roots. But I need to put them in some soil that does have some nutrients just so they have something to feed them. So that's it potted up there. As I say, I'll probably grow these over the summer in this and keep them in the conservatory. I want them to really accelerate their growth as much as they can. I might keep them in my conservatory for the first year, but I'll let them, the temperatures get quite cold in winter because they will need that cold period over winter, as they are temperate palms. They're not tropical, they don't like hot temperatures all year round. So I'll let them grow in this until they're big enough to be repotted, and then I'll put them onto probably a slightly more free draining mixture in a larger pot and with a slightly higher feed as well. So that's all for this video. I'm quite happy with the results, 100% germination rate. So it looks like the seeds were quite a good seed mix, and when it came to germination I didn't keep them too wet or too dry, and they've germinated quite nicely. So I'll see you guys maybe in a few months time. Everything happens with Trachycarpus quite slowly. We'll see how they do, see if the growth accelerates at all, and hopefully we'll get some small palm trees starting to appear in the next video. The first leaves will be just like this individual leaf, then they should start having forks on them, and then you'll get that kind of hand shape that you get with Trachycarpus as it matures.